Across the church in America today, a new movement is rising where faith leads finance and clarity drives impact. I'm Roger Argonaldo, the founder of the Catholic Faith Investors Summit and the Catholic FI Alliance, a membership community of investors focused on faith-based investing aligned with Catholic social teaching. Join the leaders transforming stewardship into mission. This is where faithful investing begins and the future of Catholic investment takes shape. This is a fireside chat from the 2025 Catholic Faith Investors Summit in October 2025 in New York City. This fireside chat was titled Mutually Exclusive: Catholic Social Teaching versus Secular Market Returns with Dennis Hammond from First Trust in conversation with Michael Skillman from Beacon Point.
It's a great honor to be here for this inaugural event and be with all of you that share the responsibility for stewarding the assets of your Catholic organizations. But I want to start out real quick by thanking Roger and his whole team at Prey Investment Management, because I've gotten to know Roger over the last few years, and I first learned about this event as a conversation and have seen it evolve, and I know how much hard work has gone into this event, and it's really come together nicely. So let's give Roger and his team a hand. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Mike Skillman. I am an institutional consultant at Beacon Point. In our role as OCIO consultant, we advise Catholic institutions, diocese schools, orders on putting together an investment program, developing their investment policy statement, developing asset allocation, and then making sure that the managers that are implementing all of that are adhering to Catholic social teaching, which has obviously moved beyond screening to engagement, which is proxy voting and engaging with company management. And that's really the theme of today's conversation, is bringing together, I call this the Missouri panel. Why the Missouri panel? Because it's the show me state, right? This is all, we should be, from the comments Steve Nelson mentioned that you wrote about, we should be.
While I was in the bathroom?
Yeah, oh, you didn't hear that? Well, it was great. Well, hopefully we record it. But we should all be drawn by our faith to bring forth incorporating social teaching to our investments. But we are fiduciaries. We need to produce that return, as Cardinal Turkson said, to provide for our mission. So the focus of this panel is really talk about the work that Dennis and his team at First Trust have done to provide data that you don't have to sacrifice your returns to develop social teaching. Many of you already know Dennis. He has a vast years of experience advising institutions on their investments, but has really leaned in these last number of years in his role at First Trust of becoming a real strong voice through his writing, through his speaking, on engaging Catholic social teaching, and the latest study, which provides that data that we're going to talk about today, that you don't need to sacrifice returns for your investments. So with that, I'll welcome Dennis, and we'll get right to the first question. We've heard a bit about the background of Catholic social teaching as it regards to investment. Can you just give us, how those principles were shaped and where we got to today?
Sure. First, I gotta thank Father Seamus Finn, John Baptiste de Francois, who's not here, and of course Cardinal Turkson. These are, the MVP hitters for me. This is the guys that I listen to and have been reading and following for years. So, three keys with Catholic social teaching. Starting back in the 1891, Rerum Novarum from Pope Leo XIII, who said, and this was the first of the encyclicals to address CST. We've had some 2,000 years since the first pope, 267 popes since him, including Pope Leo XIV. And for some reason, Pope Leo XIII starts talking about Catholic social teaching, what we now call Catholic social teaching, and during the labor, capital, and socialism issues in 1891. And he says this: all economic activity is a moral choice. All economic activity is a moral choice. Brand new idea. No one had thought about that. Talked about it in terms of workers' rights, talked about it in terms of why we don't want to go with socialism, and talked about the dichotomy between capitalism and labor. between the rich and the poor, which has only gotten exacerbated since that time. 2% of all people own 50% of all wealth. 50% of all people own 2% or less of all wealth. Roughly 90% of the wealth in the world is owned by less than 20% of the people. It's amazing. So the huge inequalities, and this is what Pope Leo started talking about. Point number 2 from Pope, I think, I'll have to look at my notes. I want to get this right one time in a row. I think it was John Paul. Look at that. It was Pope Paul the Sixth. Evangelii Nuntiati, on evangelism in the modern world. And this is key to social teaching, Catholic social teaching. He said, true evangelism, the church's core mission in the world, teaching the gospel, must be informed by Catholic social teaching. You cannot leave social justice out of evangelism. It goes hand in hand. So evangelism must consider poverty. Evangelism must consider the oppressed. Evangelism must consider the human rights abuses. If we ignore them, we cannot be true evangelists. We cannot be true Catholics in this world. The last one I want to bring up is the one from John Paul II, Veritatis Splendor. I think these three really make the case for Catholic social teaching. John Paul II said, there are universal truths. Everything is not morally relativistic. The moral relativists are wrong. Moral acts are not subjective, which means that Catholic social teaching is not a moral option. It is the moral option. So that's the setting that we find this in. 134 years now, we've had a Catholic social teaching right up to France's most recent Lexit Nos, which teaches us how to love like we are loved by the bounteous love of Jesus. We are to act to others through that love. That's how Jesus acts in us. And this is our investment management now. I'm not talking about other things. I'm talking about investment management. How do we show love in investment management? Why is it I can't tell your portfolio from everybody else's? If we put everybody's portfolios on the table, Catholic, Protestant, Jew, and confused, the only one I can really tell is the Sharia portfolio. That one I can tell. But the rest of them, probably not a chance. Unless you look for health facilities or pharmaceuticals, maybe you can see it. But they all look like modern portfolio theory. They look and sound like Harry Markowitz. And they should look and sound like Pope Leo XIII. Why haven't we done that? All right. I'm going to take an offering at the end. We'll all go get some chicken.
Dennis, though, it's a great foundation, and it's clear Catholic social teaching has laid the framework for what it means, for the common good and human dignity, and as well as stewardship. We talked about Mensuram Bonum. We obviously just had a panel on USCCB. Maybe just a moment on how do we harmonize those two things instead of thinking them as two separate things.
Well, USCCB, obviously, the first iteration was 100 years after Rerum Novarum, and then one in 2003, and then one in 2020. Or maybe it's 2021. I think that's been the bedrock in the United States. Mensuram Bonum came out, and they've added 9 new categories. So yes, they talk about exclude, and they talk about engage, and they talk about avoid. They start with engage, and then exclusion is the last one. Promotion. There are 9 new categories that are very important. They include things like capital punishment, genetic engineering, which is a huge issue for the poor. The way Monsanto, 3 companies in the world own patents on 90% of the seeds. What does that mean? Well, it means, for one thing, seed prices have gone up by 700% in the last few years. It also means that you cannot plant next year's crop without buying more seed. In the old days, you could just keep some seed back and you'd plant it again the next year. Not anymore. It doesn't work like that, so they have to go back every single time. It's one of the big issues. Another big issue in Mensuram Bonum is the overlooked rights of indigenous people. Another one is capital punishment. and animal rights and bribery. Totalitarian oppression is huge. We still in the USCCB do not have a screen against child labor. We don't have a screen against forced labor, not really, if you look at it. And there's 160 million children. Think of your children. Think of your grandkids. These are kids 3 years to 4 years to 5 years old who are in mines, who are digging cobalt out of the ground with their hands to make lithium-ion batteries, or gold, or they're in the cocoa trees, or wherever you get cocoa beans from for chocolate. Your candy, your chocolate comes from beans harvested by children. The coffee beans come from beans harvested by children. These huge companies are making billions of dollars, and we're monetizing those kids' labor. These are issues that I think Mensuram Bonum is starting to address. We also have, I think it's 2 million Uyghurs in factory prisons, and we buy Chinese goods. Now, what's up with that? So these women are separated from their husbands, and one sent one place and one sent another place, and they're, I'm sorry, I'm going on.
Yeah, I love
this
your
is
passion.
something Mensuram Bonum is addressing that we haven't addressed, and we've got to address.
So we talked on this panel, this is getting down to the data, because the number one objection I still hear is that this is all sounds good, but I'm a fiduciary, I can't sacrifice my returns. So let's talk about what the data shows that you've put together on both the S&P, the MSCI, around how these exclusions either detract or enhance from value.
All right, so I should have started there, but of course I forgot. We do direct indexing. What that means is we'll take an index, you pick an index, and we will strip out the companies that you feel are antagonistic to your faith. So it'll generally be 10 or 15% of the companies in the index, depends on the index, but we strip them out. Working with you to determine what they should be. We use 3 different data vendors to try to catch them all. The question was, how much is this going to hurt my performance? Most of the diocesan councils and investment committees are nervous about and won't use the USCCB or Mensuram Bonum because they're afraid of this. They're afraid it will hurt my performance. So we said, all right, let's see if that's the fact. Turns out it's not. It will not hurt your performance. It's a push, not a penalty. So here's what we did. We started, I'll give you 2 sets of data real quickly. We started with the longest set of data that go back 9 3/4 year from MSCI on all the companies in ACWI. They have Catholic-oriented information sets. And we ran them through starting 9 3/4 years ago with the USCCB as it was then extant, ran it, determined the performance, ran it forward 1 quarter, determined the performance, rescreened, and so forth iteratively. What we discovered was over that period, regardless of whether you were in the S&P 500, the MSCI World, or ACWI ex-US, the screens did not impair performance. Strangely enough, they enhance performance. Now, the way we do it is we re-optimize the portfolio post the exclusion set. We re-optimize the survivors. So we expect it to look like the performance of the index. But it turned out over that period of time, the USCCB screens actually added about 35 basis points annualized to the S&P, about 3% over that period. In the world, it added about 27 basis points annualized, which is about 2.5% cumulative. The point is, it didn't cost anything. But that's hypothetical. So you say, hold it. You just goofed with the numbers. Well, okay, we've got live performance too. So our live performance, and you can look at others. I think Harry Markowitz wrote a paper with Mary Brunson some time ago, and it found the same thing. There are other papers extant. But in our live performance, we have the S&P 500 and we have the S&P 600, USCCB. In both cases, the gross of fees returns were better than the returns of the index. Better than the returns of the index. All that means, you say, well, what about net? Forget net for a moment. All it means is the screens didn't impact performance. So gross to gross, the screens didn't impact performance. Now, yes, when you get our egregious fee involved, it brings it down. But that's it. That was a joke there, by the way. I'm going to give the jokes out, and it's your job to spot one. So anyway, that's how that works.
Yeah. Why do you, because of these previous studies, and my experience running equity portfolios for Catholic investors, our dispersion with secular portfolios over time was minimal. Why do you think this myth still persists?
Well, I think it's because the world's full of darkness. And it's the darkness that is trying to fight against everything that has to do with salt and light in the world. We are salt and light in the world, which I really appreciated the comment about the proxies. Look, you've got to tell your diocesan committees that ISS and Glass Lewis and BlackRock don't really have your Catholic values at the heart of their organizations. I mean, that may come as a huge surprise, but they don't. You really need to vote your proxies and be engaged as a shareholder, because that is your witness. If you let somebody else vote your proxies in favor of gender reassignment, that was your witness. If you let them vote in favor of distributing the abortion drug through UPS and FedEx, that's your witness. Stop it. Pardon me for saying that, but you need to be involved with your witness. And this we've heard from Pope Francis in Laudato Si and Tutti Fratelli. Am I getting that wrong? What he said. These all encourage us to engage with corporations and to tell them this is just, wrong. You can only do that if you own the stock. If you don't own the stock, you can't talk to them.
Well, that's an important point, because many investors, if they had a passive piece, which obviously has become a much larger portion of the portfolio today, it was through an index fund. There was efficiency, we were all told, but you lost out on this. So this term of direct indexing is relatively new. You live and breathe it every day, but maybe just expand a little bit on how direct indexing approach in a equity portfolio gives you all these options.
Okay, so let's just pick the S&P 500. Everybody's got one. The S&P 500, if you screen it for USCCB values, will take about 60 stocks out, depending on where you use the materiality threshold. The USCCB has very high materiality thresholds for things like pornography and gambling and tobacco. You might, instead of having a 50%, have a 10% or 15%. You can do it any way you want. Anyway, we would run your screens against your benchmark, strip out the bad actors. Instead of then taking the survivors and using that as a portfolio, we optimize the survivors. What that means is we're trying to find that collection and that weighting of survivors that will have the lowest tracking error. Did I say that right? Yeah, lowest tracking error, the highest match to the benchmark. So if you do that right, what you find is there's like an efficient frontier, larger number of stocks gives you a lower tracking error to a point, and then there's no marginal utility to have more stocks. So that's how we do that. We'll optimize the portfolio, and what you find is your portfolio is going to act just like that benchmark, plus or minus over time, and over long periods of time, like we've seen, it's actually helped. Don't know if it'll help going forward, but it'll be a push. So the point is, our Catholic faith does not cost us anything to implement.
So the old days where healthcare was outperforming, had a systematic bias against that. You've taken care of that through the optimization.
Well, we didn't take care of it, but yes.
Yes. Well, the process.
The market takes care of this.
Yeah. But that's important, because long term that usually works out in the wash. But we all know we're agents of other people's money, and if you underperform too much in the short term, you're not going to make it to the long term.
And even if it doesn't wash out, what's going to be more important to you when you meet your maker? That extra 50 basis points, or you did it right?
Right.
One of these days we're going to have, you're going to be straightening your tie, you're going to be combing your hair just before the big meeting. Okay? And, something's going to run through your mind like, gee whiz, should I have, could I have, oh my gosh. And you are going to have those moments just before you do. And you want to have a happy thought at that time, and not another one of those, gosh, it's getting hot in here.
So You touched on the investment benefits of direct indexing, but I think an even bigger benefit now is the opportunity to vote your shares. So talk about the proxy voting and the shareholder engagement that is the, I don't want to say a side benefit because I think it was viewed that way, but it's kind of a major benefit of a direct indexing portfolio.
I think a lot of people are coming to believe that proxy voting is more important than the direct indexing, but that's just what we're hearing. So we use Investing with Purpose, IWP. They're our proxy folks. Last year they did 3,000 meetings. They read about 25,000 shareholder proposals, and they voted 62 million shares. The key is they did it all in the context of Catholic values. And that's incredibly important to us. So we know that when we have someone like them doing, we know that we're doing it right. Can I mention one other thing?
We've
got 2 minutes.
That's okay, off. We have a few more, I think.
Okay, I want to, so I do think direct indexing is imperative. It's what I do for a living. Number 2, proxy and voting, shareholder engagement, terrifically important. But let me tell you where the future is. The future is in really following the papal encyclicals and really believing this with all your heart. Doing what the Walton family did 2 or 3 years ago. They announced they have a $1 billion fund and it's 90% missionally aligned. What if we were 90% missionally aligned? What if our portfolios sang the gospel? What if our portfolios looked like Matthew 25? What if you could pick it up and you could look at the portfolio and you could say, hey, this feeds the hungry. This gives water to the thirsty. This shelters the homeless. And it gives good jobs and decent wages and living wages to the naked. And it builds hospitals and access to medicine and all the oppressed. What if we built portfolios for impact? That's where I'm pushing right now. If we could start building portfolios for impact, following the Catholic social teachings of distributive justice, preferential option for the poor, global solidarity, subsidiarity, peace, participation, all these things. If you could bake that into that cake and still, here's the trick, this is why people don't do it, and still make a market rate return for illiquid investments. That is, the Holy Grail. And that's what we're all looking for. And it's why there aren't very many. But you know what? There's going to be some. I don't have one yet, but we're building one. There's other firms that are. That's where you need to be. You need to be thinking about that.
And where are you on that journey? Are you thinking more in private equity, real estate?
I think it has to be the whole shebang. Yeah. You're going to have private equity guys. You're going to have venture capital guys, real estate. We've got to end the homelessness problem. We've got to figure this out. What did I say? Venture capital, private equity, real estate. Private credit, that's the other one. I love the guys in Chicago, Creation Capital, Peter Fisher, who is providing below market loans in India and Mexico, better default rates than anybody, I don't remember what, it's like double-digit returns to investors, but they are providing below market rate 2-3% loans to the indigent, so that they can start a job. They can buy a motorbike and do a distribution, or they can buy a sewing machine. They're even so they give them a $300 loan at 2%, and these guys are making a 19% return to investors. It's that kind of idea that we need to be thinking about to build our portfolios going forward the next decade.
That's great. And I think, if you think of Mensuram Bonum, the exclude and the engage is handled in the public equity portfolio. I know we're going to hear more later today on this enhanced piece or impact. It wasn't an E, so they've left it at enhanced. But we're going to hear more about that on the private investment. I think we're clearly just at the nascent stages of the opportunities there.
And guys like you are guiding this. So I want to thank you for that. It's the consultants that are at the forefront of this. It's they to whom all the dioceses and the investment committees look to for ideas and for guidance. So we appreciate you.
Well, we're in this together on behalf of the asset owners and all our constituents. But if there's one thought the three-point shot at the buzzer. If there's one thought you could leave the group today on one key takeaway about this message, what would it be?
All moral activity, I'm going to start over again, pardon me. All economic activity is a moral choice. We have to remember that.
I think that's a great takeaway.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone.
This year's summit proved what's possible when faith shapes investment. We go further, uniting more Catholic leaders ready to invest with purpose, integrity, and grace. Shape the legacy, live the calling. Visit our website for the Catholic FI Alliance at catholicfi.com to learn more.